3 morning habits that quietly destroy your erection. Let me tell you about Thomas. He was 68, newly retired, and proud of it. Every morning he followed the same ritual: black coffee, a scroll through the news, a brisk walk around the block. His blood pressure was decent, his cholesterol manageable. He wasn't running marathons, but he wasn't falling apart either, and yet something was missing, something deeply personal. One morning he sat on the edge of the bed, watching his wife breathe softly beside him. They hadn't been intimate in nearly a year, not out of resentment or lack of love, but because when the moment came, it didn't. He had chalked it up to age. "It's just part of getting older," he told himself, a whisper of defeat that quietly settled in his bones. But here's what shocked him. It wasn't age, not entirely. It was his mornings. What he did in the first 90 minutes of his day, without even thinking, was quietly sabotaging the very part of him that once brought him pride, connection, and joy. You see, there are habits we carry like old coats, comfortable, familiar. But some of them, especially in the soft, vulnerable hours of the morning, can quietly unravel our vitality. Today, I want to show you 3, each one wrapped in a story, each one carrying a truth we rarely speak aloud. And I want to start with the one that caught Thomas completely off guard: the quiet erosion of digital noise. Thomas once described it like this: "I don't even remember picking up my phone. One moment I'm waking up, the next I'm scrolling through chaos." He wasn't alone. For many of us, the first thing we reach for in the morning isn't a loved one. It's a device, a glowing screen, a portal to news, notifications, outrage, distraction. But what does that actually do to a body? And more importantly, to a man's intimate self? Here's what I've seen. When your brain is bombarded with stimulation before you've even stood up, your nervous system doesn't start the day with calm focus. It starts with cortisol, the stress hormone. And cortisol, in elevated chronic doses, is the quiet saboteur of testosterone. It narrows your blood vessels, it constricts your libido, it whispers to your body, "Now is not the time for love. Now is the time to survive." You might not feel anxious, you might feel informed or entertained, but underneath, your physiology is shifting. The blood flow that once moved freely through your body, that brought you strength, spontaneity, and confidence, is now being rerouted, away from pleasure, away from presence, toward vigilance, toward armor. And the irony? Most of what we consume in that first hour has no real meaning, no nourishment, just noise. A question that changes the lens. What if the reason your body doesn't respond the way it used to isn't because it's broken? What if it's overwhelmed? What if your morning doesn't need more information, but less? I once asked Thomas to try a simple change. For 7 days, no screens for the first hour after waking. Instead, a quiet cup of tea, a journal, a walk without his phone, a moment to breathe and feel. By day 3, something shifted. He said, "It's like my body started trusting me again." That trust between your mind and your body is the quiet foundation of arousal, and once lost, it must be rebuilt gently, intentionally. A glimpse into the next habit. But the screen isn't the only culprit. There's another morning ritual, one many consider healthy, even disciplined, that can silently erode not just your erection, but your entire hormonal balance. And no, it's not what you think. In the next chapter, I'll take you into the story of Luis, 70, fit, committed to his health, and yet unknowingly draining the very energy he needed to feel like a man. His mistake was simple. It had to do with sweat ambition, and a complete misunderstanding of how older bodies regenerate testosterone. But more on that soon. For now, I'll leave you with this. The way you begin your morning echoes through your night. And sometimes the first step toward reclaiming your power is not doing more. It's doing less, but with care. The overexercised heart. When morning discipline backfires, Luis was 70, lean, well-postured, and, as he liked to joke, still able to fit in the jeans I wore in '74. He was the kind of man others admired for his commitment. Sunrise workouts, perfect macros, resting heart rate of a college athlete. And yet, he came to see me with a concern he couldn't quite admit out loud. He hesitated at first, shifted in his chair, then finally said, "I feel strong, but I don't feel like a man anymore." It wasn't about performance, not exactly. It was about the slow disappearance of desire, the stillness in his body where heat used to live. He wasn't broken, he was overtrained. The misunderstood morning ritual. Luis's mornings were scripted with military precision. Wake at 5:30, drink a protein shake, then high-intensity interval training for 45 minutes. He had read that testosterone loves strength training, and he believed he was fueling it. But here's what he didn't know. When you're in your 20s or 30s, vigorous morning workouts spike testosterone. Your body rebounds quickly, muscles grow, libido climbs, but in your 60s or 70s, your body plays by different rules. The endocrine system, the delicate orchestra of hormones, has changed its rhythm, and what once boosted testosterone now risks depleting it. Because when you wake up and immediately push your body into high stress with loud music, fast movements, shallow breath, you activate your sympathetic nervous system. And just like with screen time, this releases cortisol. Not the small, healthy dose your body needs, but the chronic surge that tells your system, "We are under threat. Delay pleasure." Preserve energy. Suppress libido. It's like shouting at a seed to grow faster. You get resistance, not results. The testosterone paradox. Luis had unknowingly stepped into what I call the testosterone paradox. He was doing all the right things, but at the wrong intensity and at the wrong time. Here's the quiet truth. Testosterone is made when you rest, not when you perform. It's rebuilt when you sleep deeply, breathe slowly, and recover fully. The very discipline that made Luis proud was slowly draining his masculine reserves. So I asked him to try something radical, trade his high-intensity circuits for slow strength. 2 days of Tai Chi, 1 day of slow resistance bands. Replace his protein shake with a high-fat, low-carb breakfast. And most importantly, let his mornings begin gently, not as a battle, as a courtship. What changed? The first week, he hated it. "I feel like I'm slacking," he said. But by the 3rd week, he sent me a message I'll never forget. "My dreams are different. I feel more heat. I woke up this morning wanting to touch her." That was all, but it was everything. Because when a man reclaims his softness, not as weakness, but as readiness, his whole physiology shifts. Blood moves differently. Hormones whisper differently. Desire returns not as urgency, but as invitation. Let me ask you, what are you pushing for every morning? And is that push, that effort, serving your strength or stealing from it? We've been told that effort equals worth, that discipline equals masculinity. But after 60, a different wisdom is required, one where less isn't laziness, it's mastery. The habit that comes next. There's one more habit that threads through so many of my patients' mornings, quietly, almost invisibly. It doesn't shout like exercise or buzz like screens. It arrives in a cup, dark, bitter, and for many, absolutely sacred. But for certain men, especially those dealing with thinning blood flow, irregular sleep, and fading erections, it may be the most dangerous ritual of all. Yes, I'm talking about coffee. In the next chapter, I'll introduce you to Malcolm, 74, sharp as a tack, loyal to his French press, and what happened when he took a break. Not just from caffeine, but from what he thought was keeping him going. What he discovered might surprise you. Until then, I leave you with this. Sometimes restoring your power isn't about running harder. It's about slowing down until your body starts to speak again. The caffeine illusion, how a morning cup can numb a man's fire. Malcolm was precise. Every morning at 6:45, he brewed his French press, ground the beans by hand, heated the water to exactly 200 degrees. 3.5 minutes of steeping. No sugar, no cream, just heat and focus. "I don't feel human without it," he once joked. At 74, Malcolm still ran his consulting business from home. He played bridge on Tuesdays, read the Financial Times, and wore his gray hair like a crown. But his confidence was divided. In the boardroom, unshaken. In the bedroom, uncertain. His words came slowly. "It's not like it's totally gone," he said. "But the spark, the physical response, it's just thinner." He had blamed age, sleep, maybe even his cholesterol meds, but never, not once, did he suspect his beloved coffee. And yet, there it was. The truth about caffeine and erections. Let's be clear. Caffeine isn't evil. In moderation, it sharpens the mind, boosts dopamine, and may even support blood flow in some people. But in men over 60, especially those with underlying vascular issues, blood pressure concerns, or disrupted sleep, caffeine becomes a double-edged sword. Because here's what many don't realize. Erection is not about will. It's about relaxation. Blood must flow freely into the penile arteries. The smooth muscle must soften. Nitric oxide must be released. A quiet messenger molecule that says to your vessels, open, allow, expand. But caffeine does the opposite. It tightens, stimulates, contracts. It activates your sympathetic nervous system, the same fight-or-flight state we touched on earlier, the one that tells your body, this is not the time for connection, this is the time for performance. And worse, caffeine can subtly impair sleep. Even if you fall asleep, the depth of your rest suffers. And testosterone, the lifeblood of male desire, is made at night, during the deepest phases of slumber. So Malcolm's ritual, which gave him mental sharpness by day, was silently robbing him of vitality by night. The gentle break. We didn't go cold turkey. That would have been cruel and unnecessary. Instead, we tapered. Half calf for 2 weeks, then herbal teas, then a full switch to warm lemon water in the morning, followed by light stretching and music. He thought he'd lose his edge. But something else happened. 3 weeks in, he texted me. Strangest thing, I woke up aroused. No reason, no dream, just present. Not forced, not chased, just there. That's the beauty of physiology when it's not being overmanaged. It doesn't need hype, it needs space. And once that space was given, his body remembered. The broader lesson, we live in a culture that worships alertness. Wake up, hustle, perform. But the male body after 60 speaks a different language. It says, give me peace, let me breathe, let me recover, so I can feel again. Caffeine can be part of your life, yes, but not as a crutch, not as a whip. If you rely on it to feel alive in the morning, ask what's underneath that fatigue. Often, it's sleep debt, hormonal depletion, emotional hunger. And those can be healed, not with another cup, but with care. Let's pause and reflect. Think of your mornings. Are they rituals of restoration or rituals of resistance? Do they make your body feel welcome or under siege? Your erection, believe it or not, is listening. It's not a performance tool. It's not a measure of manhood. It's a signal from your deepest systems saying yes to life, or not yet. And you get to choose how loudly that voice speaks. Next, we go deeper. You now know the 3 habits: early digital stress, overintensity in fitness, morning caffeine dependence. But here's the twist. Even when men correct these, some still find themselves flat, numb, uninterested. Why? Because there's something even deeper than habits, something quieter than hormones, something that lives not in the body, but in the story a man tells himself. In our next chapter, we'll meet Vincent, 78, widowed, seemingly disinterested in intimacy for years. But what we uncovered had nothing to do with blood flow. It had everything to do with grief, unspoken, unprocessed, buried in his chest. Because sometimes what blocks an erection isn't physical at all. It's a locked room in the heart. Shall we go there next? The grief beneath the skin. When the body goes quiet. After loss. Vincent hadn't touched another human being in 8 years, not the way he used to, not with intention. His wife, Marjorie, had passed gently, a stroke in her sleep. The house had stayed the same, her teacup on the shelf, her scent faintly lingering in the bedroom. He still made 2 cups of coffee every morning. One stayed untouched. "I suppose I just stopped needing," he told me once, but his eyes betrayed something else, a longing not for sex, but for permission. He hadn't lost the ability. He had lost the story, the hidden cost of silence. When a man loses a partner, whether to death, divorce, or distance, something deeper than loneliness settles in, a muting of the inner voice that once whispered, "You are wanted, you are welcome." And in that silence, the body forgets how to speak. Vincent was healthy. His labs were fine, his heart strong. But when he tried to be with someone new, a gentle widow he met at the market, his body didn't respond. No arousal, no interest, just stillness. He felt embarrassed. "I guess I'm just done," he said. But I didn't believe that, because intimacy isn't just physical. It's emotional permission to be touched, to be seen, to be vulnerable again. And grief, when unprocessed, shuts that door. How the body stores absence. We often think of grief as tears, but for many men, it's stillness, functional detachment. Life goes on, but never through the pain, only around it, and the body follows. Blood stops flowing where it once rushed freely. Hormones quiet where they once pulsed. Muscles tighten, the chest hardens, not out of age, out of defense. Because desire requires openness, a soft belly, a hopeful heart, and grief says, "Not safe." So Vincent's morning habits weren't the issue. It was his evenings, the empty bed, the absence he never allowed himself to name. A quiet return. Healing didn't come quickly. We began with a ritual. Each morning he wrote 1 sentence to Marjorie, not to move on, but to move through. He cried once, just once. But after that day, his voice changed. He began noticing women again, not in a lustful way, in a present way. He cleaned the other mug, started using it when a friend came over, and 3 months later, he told me something extraordinary. "I woke up with an erection. No one was there, but I felt possible again." That's what grief steals. Not just people, but possibility. And when it lifts, even slightly, the body breathes again. The deeper truth. Sometimes what blocks an erection is not blood, or muscle, or age. It's memory. It's guilt. It's the fear of loving again, and losing again. Your body is loyal. It protects you, even from intimacy, if it thinks it might bring pain. But you can teach it new safety. And sometimes that begins not with a pill, but with a whisper. "It's okay. I'm still here, and I want to feel again." Where we go from here. You've now seen 3 habits and 1 wound. You've seen how physiology, behavior, and emotion dance together in quiet choreography. But we're not done, because there is one final saboteur, not in the body, not in the heart, but in the mind. A story many men carry, that their worth is tied to performance, that if they can't do, they aren't a man. In our next chapter, we meet Robert, 66, newly remarried, panicked by a single moment of failure. What followed nearly destroyed his second chance at love. Because sometimes the biggest threat to a man's erection is his belief that it defines him, and that's the myth we'll gently unravel next. Shall we keep going? When performance becomes a prison, the fear that steals pleasure. Robert had remarried at 66. His first wife passed away after a long illness, years of caretaking, quiet grief, a slow goodbye. When he met Dana at a book club, it felt like spring again. They talked for hours, touched hands over coffee, laughed without rehearsing. And then came the night. The candles, the music, her kindness, his readiness. Except nothing happened. His body, so eager, so prepared, didn't respond. Dana kissed his forehead and held him. But inside, Robert collapsed. "I failed," he whispered. "I don't think I can face her again." The hidden wound of male identity. We don't talk enough about the pressure men carry into the bedroom. Not desire, not longing. Pressure. To respond on command. To satisfy. To prove, in a single moment, that they are still powerful, still capable, still a man. And when the body hesitates, even once, the shame is immediate, deep, paralyzing. It says, "You're broken, you're done." But let's tell the truth, gently and clearly. Erections are not a measure of manhood. They're not an exam. They are responses, complex, delicate, sensitive to stress, emotion, memory, and environment. And when a man feels watched, even by himself, the very thing he longs for retreats. What happens in the brain? An erection isn't born in the body. It's born in the brain. The limbic system, where desire lives, is quieted by fear, and the prefrontal cortex, the voice that judges, compares, analyzes, becomes loud, too loud. It's like trying to listen to a love song during a fire drill, so the blood doesn't flow, the body doesn't soften, not because it doesn't want to, but because it doesn't feel safe. Robert hadn't failed. He had panicked because the myth of masculinity had told him, if you can't, you aren't. And that lie cuts deep. The turnaround. Dana didn't leave. She didn't mock. She didn't withdraw. She touched his cheek and said the words he never expected. "I didn't marry you for your erections. I married you for your hands, your voice, your stories. I'm not leaving because your body paused. I'm here for the long song." And with that, something cracked open. Over the following weeks, we reframed everything. Intimacy wasn't about success. It was about connection. Pressure was replaced with play. He learned to speak, to breathe, to stay. And one morning, without thinking, his body responded, not from force, from presence. A question worth asking: what would happen if you stopped trying to perform and started trying to feel? What if your partner or your future partner doesn't need you to be a statue of virility, but a mirror of vulnerability? What if your value wasn't measured in minutes, but in presence? You're not a machine. You're a man. And sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is say, "I need time. I need softness. I need connection." And that, my friend, is manhood. What's still ahead? We've walked through habits, through grief, through the mind's weight. But there's one final thread we must tug at, a quiet, often ignored truth, that sometimes the body goes quiet because it's starving, not for intimacy, but for touch, daily, consistent, non-sexual touch. Because the male body after 60 still needs warmth, still needs affection, still needs to be held, without expectation. And in our next chapter, we meet Charles, 79, long widowed, and how one simple act of being touched on the shoulder began to bring his body back to life. Because sometimes the path to intimacy begins not in the bedroom, but in the hallway. Shall I bring you into that story next? The touch we forgot to ask for. Reawakening the body, without expectation. Charles was 79 and lived alone in a house filled with softness, quilts his late wife had sewn, framed photos of their travels, a fireplace that still carried the scent of her favorite candles. He wore cardigans even in summer, made tea at the same time every afternoon, and while he smiled often, his shoulders always leaned slightly forward, as if hugging something invisible. He came to see me not with a complaint, but with a question. "Is it normal," he asked gently, "to not want anything?" I asked what he meant. "Intimacy," he said. "I used to feel. Now I just exist." He wasn't depressed. He wasn't ill. His labs were remarkably steady for his age, but his body and heart had grown quiet. I asked him about touch, and that's when the silence grew heavier. "Besides handshakes," he said, "I haven't been touched in over a decade." The loneliness of the untouched body. We talk so much about sex, performance, hormones, but rarely do we speak of touch, the kind with no agenda, no goal, just presence. The male body needs it just as much as the female. Perhaps more so as we age, because while testosterone may decline, the need for oxytocin, the bonding hormone, increases. A hand on the back, a shoulder squeeze, an arm gently looped into yours. These gestures release oxytocin, they lower cortisol, they soften the nervous system, and in time, they can reawaken dormant desire. But when the body goes untouched for years, it forgets, not just how to be aroused, but how to be receptive. The gentle experiment, I asked Charles to do something simple, yet profound. "Say yes," I said, "to any touch that comes your way, without embarrassment, without deflection." He chuckled. "At my age, I'm not exactly beating them off." Still, he agreed. At church the next Sunday, a friend hugged him tightly. He didn't rush it. At the grocery store, the cashier handed him his receipt with a warm pat on the wrist. He noticed it, let it land. And then something small, but seismic, happened. A neighbor invited him to a community dance. He didn't dance, just sat. But a woman named Rosa touched his shoulder as she laughed beside him. He came to me the next week, eyes wider. I felt something, not lust, just electricity, like I remembered I had skin. And that's exactly it. The male body, even in its 70s, 80s, and beyond, is not dead. It's often just numbed, not by age, but by isolation. And the cure is not always medical. Sometimes it begins with presence, with being touched, seen, met. For the men reading, this, ask yourself, when was the last time you were touched, with no expectation, not sexually, not to fix you, just touched? And if it's been too long, know this. There's no shame in wanting that. There's no weakness in needing it. It's human, and it may be the missing thread in your return to intimacy. One last door to open. We've walked far now. The habits that constrict us, the emotions that quiet us, the myths that shame us, the silence that numbs us. But there's one final element we must meet, perhaps the most radical of all. Hope, not the naive kind, but the kind that returns after despair. The kind that whispers, it's not too late, even after decades of distance. In our final chapter, we meet Alvin, 83, who thought his body was long past desire, and how, through one unplanned moment of laughter, he discovered that the fire within him was not gone, just waiting for an invitation. Shall I close the journey with Alvin's story? The last fire, how one laugh rekindled a forgotten flame. Alvin was 83 when he fell in love again. It wasn't planned. He wasn't searching. He had made peace, he thought, with solitude. His wife of 52 years had passed 8 years prior. Since then, he lived quietly. Letters to his grandchildren, soup on Sundays, crossword puzzles, silence. And yet there was an ache, not for sex, not directly, but for closeness. The feeling of skin near skin, breath shared in the quiet, the sacred intimacy of being seen across a dinner table and having someone say, "I still want to know you." He didn't think that was for him anymore. Until Margaret laughed. The moment it changed, it was at a friend's birthday, a small afternoon gathering with cake and cardigans. Margaret, a widow with silver curls and curious eyes, sat beside him. They talked about jazz, about forgotten lyrics, about the absurdity of modern phones. And then something small happened. Alvin misheard a word and repeated it back, utterly wrong. Margaret burst out laughing, not at him, with him, and Alvin laughed too, from his gut, from his belly, from somewhere that had been quiet for years, and in that moment, laughing beside her, he felt his body warm, not perform, just warm. He didn't say anything, but something inside whispered, "I'm still here." What happened after? They began meeting on Wednesdays, just tea at first, then short walks, then a movie, then one evening, as she said goodbye on his porch, she held his hand a second longer. The next morning, Alvin woke up, aroused. He hadn't taken anything. He hadn't tried. His body, without prompt, without pressure, had simply responded to connection, and when he told me later, his voice shook. I thought it was gone, but it was just waiting for joy. The lesson: there are men, thousands of them, who believe it's too late for desire, too late for intimacy, too late for their body to feel something other than pain, fatigue, or stillness. But Alvin's story, and so many like his, reminds us of a quiet truth. Your body isn't a machine that breaks down. It's a garden, and gardens can bloom again, even after a long winter. What they need is light, warmth, a reason, not force, not shame, not performance, just permission. So, what now? We've walked through the habits that silently sabotage blood flow, the rituals that feel right but drain your strength, the myths that make you judge your own body, the grief that silences your desires, the hunger for touch we forgot to name, and now, the rebirth of hope. If you take one thing from this entire journey, let it be this: your body is not done. Your heart is not closed. Your capacity to connect, to feel, to be moved, to arouse and be aroused, is not behind you. It is still here. Maybe quiet, maybe slow to wake, but still here. And when you stop rushing it, when you stop shaming it, when you meet it with kindness and curiosity, it will speak to you again, not like it did at 30, but with more depth, more meaning, more truth. A final note from me: if you're still reading, thank you, not because I need the clicks, but because you chose to show up for yourself, for your body, for your story. If this message touched you, I hope you'll share it with a friend, a partner, someone who's also wondering if it's too late. And if you'd like more stories like this, rooted in truth, shaped by care, please like this post, leave a comment, or subscribe to the channel. Because here, in this space, you are not invisible. You are not broken. You are not alone. You are still alive. And that matters always. With warmth and respect, Dr.